Hello, BookTube. I've got some new releases for you here, new-ish or forthcoming stuff. None of them in packages, all opened off camera, but still things that I think you'd probably want to know about. I certainly like to tell you about as many new books as possible because you might be more interested in some of these things than I am. So, it shouldn't be curated by me. Instead, it should just be presented by me. I've got a stack of books I want to show you here. Starting with this first one, which doesn't come out until February of 2022. But oh my, you mystery fans out there have something to put on your TBR. Look at this thing. This is by the great Peter Lovesey, and this is called Reader, I Buried Them, and Other Stories. Look at that cover. He's writing with a teacup and pen and ink and with an intrusive cat. And outside the window, a graveyard, of course. Peter Lovesey is a great mystery author. And this is an anthology of work, including quite a few stories that are brand new. Let me tell you about this a little. What have we got here? More than 50 years ago, Peter Lovesey published a short story in an anthology. That short story caught the eye of the great Ruth Rendell, whose praise ignited Lovesey's lifelong passion for short-form crime fiction. Peter has assembled this devilishly clever collection that features classic murder sets and well-crafted characters whose lives have all been touched by crime in the most unexpected of ways. In the deadliest tale of all, we are given a portrait of Edgar Allan Poe, who is working on his next tale when he is visited by a reporter from the Tribune wanting to interview him. Poe is hoping this interview will help his reputation and convey that his art is not his character, but he's accused of borrowing much of his work from other writers without giving them due credit. We soon find out that the reporter has less than pure and perhaps even deadly intentions. In a 3-pie problem, we're transported to the world of Peter Diamond's Bath, England. It's Christmas time, and Peter is begrudgingly spending the holidays with his in-laws when he is called to investigate the death of Fletcher Merriman, senior partner in Merriman and Palmer. Merriman is said to have died of heart failure, but the assistant chief constable believes there's foul play, considering everyone who saw him last had reason to knock him off, and so on. This is just a full collection of Peter Lovesey's short stories, including some original ones. Fantastic. So, and also, not that we're superficial here at all, a gorgeous cover. So, this comes out in February. Cannot wait. That's just fantastic. We're off to a fine start, but there's all sorts. There's a mixture of everything in here. Where am I going to put this? All right. This next one, little bit melancholy, little bit of trouble, but we'll try to overcome it. I will try not to just rant for 40 minutes because it's not the author's fault. This is by Ronald Gruner, and it's called We the Presidents, How American Presidents Shaped the Last Century. Very lovely looking thing here you have, because solely for the decision to do this kind of photo overlay, this artistic overlay of a photo. It adds so much rather than simply being a photo. So the author founded and served as chief executive of 3 successful tech firms. During his 35 years as a chief executive, he regularly faced complex challenges requiring the balance of shareholder, customer, and employee interests while remaining focused on the long term despite short-term pressures. His experiences as an accomplished executive have resulted in a different breed of presidential history. This book focuses on the effects rather than the causes, on results rather than politics, on economics rather than ideology, and on the connections linking presidential administrations rather than isolated presidency. I think you admit that's a fairly interesting approach to things, right? The nuts and bolts of all this thing by a lifelong executive. The president is, after all, called the chief executive. So this comes out in mid-January. And let's see here. Unlike most presidential histories, the author tackles each president from Warren G. Harding, beginning in 1921, through Donald J. Trump and the January 6, 2001 insurrection, one chapter at a time. The focus is not on their partisan politics, but instead on economic triumphs, policy accomplishments, and each president's lasting impact on the American landscape over the century. And that is fantastic. That I am always up for a big narrative study of the American presidency and American presidents. The only problem, and I'm not going to harp because I have nothing but goodwill for this author. The only problem that I have with books like this is that when you create a narrative like this, you tempt readers to see just a still, static tapestry. And that isn't true. January 6th stopped that from being true. On January 6th, the President of the United States orchestrated and incited a violent insurrection to keep himself in power. Nothing even remotely close to that had ever happened before in American history. That president is still at large. That president is still a free man. Has faced no trial, no criminal charges, no treason, no execution for doing that. Is, in fact, incredibly the odds-on favorite to be the next candidate for his party in the next presidential election, having narrowly avoided destroying the government to make it a dictatorship. It's a farce. And if Donald Trump is still alive, he will certainly run for president for 2022. So when you're discussing this whole subject, there has to be not a blip on the radar, but a gigantic crack in the narrative. It has to stop, wait a while, talking about a completely different subject, treason, insurrection, and then start again. It has to start up again. It can't just take that in as part of the tapestry. So we will see. We will have to see. I, of course, will not read this year. We'll see next year if this author manages to do that. It sounds like he has the right approach and the right background. An interesting background, I should say. I have nothing but respect for presidential historians, but for somebody who has a background as a CEO to come at this, number one, he'll respect documentation, which is great. He'll know perfectly well that most people encountering his book will think of him as some sort of parvenu, and he won't want that. A lot of times, so-called amateur historians like that will make sure they have their ducks in a row before they bring out a book. I look forward to that. I look forward to seeing that and how it's done. But also concentrating on results, concentrating on the pragmatics. In a way, I kind of wish that the book would stop before January 6th. Because before January 6th, at least there was a semblance of normality in the Trump presidency. Before January 6th, if January 6th weren't in your narrative, then you could talk about what the Trump presidency was like economically, or what it was like with domestic policy or foreign policy or whatever. January 6th stops that conversation, stops all conversations. So I kind of wish they weren't in this book, but we'll see. Maybe when I get to it, I'll be glad to read the author's take on it. Then this next book comes out soon. I think this is a November release. Yes, this comes out at the end of the month. And unfortunately, we're not getting far away from Donald Trump, but I will try not to rant. This is by Lawrence Tabak, and it's called Foxconn: Imaginary Jobs, Bulldozed Homes, and the Sacking of Local Government. When Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker stood shoulder to shoulder with President Trump and Speaker of the House Paul Ryan at the White House in July of 2017, they painted a glorious picture of his state's future. Foxconn, the enormous China-based electronics firm, was promising to bring TV manufacturing back to the United States with a $10 billion investment and 13,000 well-paying jobs. They actually were making America great again, they crowed. Do you remember that? Some of you might, if you follow American presidential politics like I do, you might remember that. 2 years later, the project was in shambles. 10,000 construction workers were supposed to have been building what Trump had promised would be the eighth wonder of the world. Instead, land had been seized, homes had been destroyed, and hundreds of millions of municipal dollars had been committed for just a few hundred jobs, nowhere near enough for Foxconn to earn the incentives Walker had shoveled at them. In Foxconn, journalist Lawrence Tabak details the full story of this utter collapse, which was disturbingly inevitable. As the author shows, everything about Foxconn was a disaster. But worse, he reveals how the economic incentive structure across the country is broken, leading to waste, cronyism, and the steady transfer of tax revenue to corporations. He details every kind of financial chicanery, from eminent domain abuse to good old-fashioned looting, all to benefit the coterie of consultants, politicians, and contractors. Now we will see. This is coming out in a couple of weeks, so I will put it on the immediate to be read pile. We will see what kind of a job the author does connecting Trump and especially Jared Kushner to that whole deal. If Lawrence Tabak connects lower level officials, Scott Walker, the Wisconsin Combine, or whatever, with Foxconn, and does not characterize it as Donald Trump himself making a deal. Donald Trump himself getting millions of dollars from Foxconn simply for greenlighting it, simply for signing his name. And then Donald Trump and Jared Kushner and the White House's Future Business Initiative, or whatever the BS name was, simply taking the money. If Lawrence Tabak doesn't chronicle that, if he chronicles Donald Trump as basically a bystander to a lot of this, then this is not the final subject. This is not the final word on the subject, because all of that was true. Donald Trump and Jared Kushner looted this whole procedure right from the beginning, simply taking money. Yes, all the other abuses that he mentions there did happen. People lost their homes. The government just seized them. Said, this, we're making America great again. Trump ran on a ticket of bringing jobs back to America. So I'm sorry, that's eminent domain. That takes precedence over you having this home that you've had for 100 years. And nothing came of it. Those people were dispossessed, but nothing came of it. So we'll see. It's not a long book. Maybe, frustratingly, it will be incomplete, which would be a little disappointing. Then we have Wild Spectacle by Janice Ray, the author of Ecology of a Cracker Childhood. So what have we got here? This is from Trinity University Press, and it comes out probably November. Yes. Yes, this comes out in November as a $26 hardcover. Let's see here. Pretty nice cover. I kind of like it. Although if I remember correctly, you birders would know better than I do, but if I remember correctly, the bird, particularly that's described on the cover there, does not flock. Could be wrong about that. Looking for adventure and continuing a process of self-discovery, the author has repeatedly set out to immerse herself in wildness, to be wild, and to learn what wildness can teach us. Always funny when someone raised the way I was looks at humans talking about being wild. From overwintering with monarch butterflies in Mexico to counting birds in Belize, the stories in Wild Spectacle capture her luckiest moments, ones of heart-pounding amazement, discovery of romance, and moving towards living more wisely. In the author's worst moments, she crosses boundaries to encounter danger and embrace sadness. So this will be a very personal memoir that is nevertheless anchored in nature. That is fairly interesting. So we'll see. This comes out, I don't think I have a more specific date. It's just November, so this may be in your bookstores already. Wild Spectacle. This next one I'm promising not to bury it in snark. Because this is an honest thing. This is an earnest thing. I am going to try not to bury this in snark. This is a collaborative work by Roberta Katz, Sarah Ogilvie, Jane Shaw, and Linda Woodhead. And it's called Gen Z Explained. Let's see here. Born since the mid-1990s, Generation Z is the first generation never to know the world without the internet, or, from the authorship, without men. And it is the most diverse generation yet. As Gen Z starts to emerge into adulthood and enter the workforce, what do we really know about them? See, I'm resisting the urge. And what can we learn from them? Gen Z Explained is the authoritative portrait of this significant generation. It draws on extensive interviews that display the generation's candor, surveys that explore their views and attitudes, and a vast database of their astonishingly inventive lexicon to build a comprehensive picture of their values, daily lives, and outlook. Gen Z emerges here as an extraordinarily thoughtful, promising, and perceptive generation. I am controlling myself. I am going to get to the end of this controlling myself. Much of this existing literature about Gen Z has been highly judgmental. In contrast, this book provides a deep and nuanced understanding of a generation facing a future of enormous challenges, from climate change to civil unrest. What's more, they are facing this future head-on, relying on themselves and their peers to work collaboratively to solve these problems. As this book shows, this group of young people is as compassionate and imaginative as any that has come before. Now that, I agree. In fact, that's an understatement. They're far more imaginative than any generation that has ever been. And understanding the way they tackle issues may enable us to envision new kinds of solutions. Okay. And I'm proud of myself. I got through all of that. And this comes out on November 15th, so right next week. So if you are out there, this is the reason I do these things, right? This is from the University of Chicago Press. One of the reasons I do these things is because it might hit squarely in your sweet spot and not in mine. If you, for instance, are a parent who have a Gen Z, who have produced a Gen Z, you might want to give them this book, or even get it for yourself. Read it, see how it echoes your own lived experience. Or, for instance, if you are a teacher of Gen Z or a guidance counselor of Gen Z, I haven't read the book yet, so I don't know what kind of a job the authors do, but there's bound to be a lot of thought-provoking stuff in here anyway, even if they're ridiculously biased. Which it sounds like they are. It sounds like they went into this book not wanting to discover anything negative about Gen Z. I will be, just from that description, I'll be amazed in the course of this little book if I encounter anything that's negative about Gen Z. And that would be bad, because there is plenty that is negative about Gen Z. I may not have written a book on the subject, but I've spent a great deal of time with members of this generation. There's plenty that's negative. There's plenty that's positive. But there's plenty that's negative. And I would hope that the authors would include that in this portrait instead of just excuse making. We shall see. I will report back. I just wanted you to know that it was out there. Then we have romance. This is by Maisie Eddings, and it has one of those cartoon covers that are just ubiquitous for romance. This comes out in March of 2022, so I'm not going to read it until then, so I can't report on how good it is. But it's called A Brush with Love. And I don't think that's toothpaste. I think that's supposed to be paint. Wait, is she holding a toothbrush? Oh, no, she is. She's holding a toothbrush. So this is about dentistry. I did not know that. Harper is anxiously and completely focused on becoming an oral surgeon when she crashes literally into Dan, so a meet cute, a drop-dead gorgeous, heart on his scrubs sleeve dental student. Okay, scrubs are short-sleeved, aren't they? Okay, so she is maniacally focused on becoming an oral surgeon, and he is a dental student, and he's drop-dead gorgeous. And she runs into him by accident. Dan's willing to play by Harper's rules and be just friends. If God had intended people to be just friends with people who are drop-dead gorgeous, I don't think he'd put them in this world. Now, would he have? But as the two, they are signposts for temptation. That's what they're here for. But as the two get to know each other better, trading fillings for feelings may prove to be more challenging than either expected. Okay, that sentence was so horrific. Not the wording of it, but not the grammar, but the rhetoric. That I want to do it again. I want to read it again. But as the two get to know each other better, trading fillings for feelings may prove to be more challenging than either expected. 3-hour extractions and decaying teeth? No problem. Falling in love? Heart-wrenchingly painful. It's a dentist love story. Considering how reviled dentists are, why not just make them both lawyers? If you're going to try and humanize dentists, I ask you. Then this last book that we'll look at for this little new arrivals feature is not a new arrival. The only reason I mention it is that I'll show it to you is because I'm pretty sure it has a sequel that's coming up. This is by A.K. Larkwood. I don't know if we ever saw this on this channel. This is The Unspoken Name. And this came out in February of 2020, so almost 2 full years ago. I think it has a sequel that's coming out now, which is the reason I put it in this pile, to sort of show it to you and tell you about it, because I don't think we ever talked about it. So the hero's name in this story is CSORWE. I'm 100% certain that is an anagram for something from Twitter. Some piece of blue check mark Twitter politics. I am sure that is an anagram for something like that. But I have no idea how to pronounce it. Swarwe? Let's say Swarwe. Swarwe is the epic hero fantasy we've been waiting for. What if you knew how and when you will die? Swarwe does. She will climb the mountain, enter the shrine of the unspoken, and become the child sacrifice for a dark, nameless god. But when the day comes, a powerful mage offers her a new fate: leave and live. Swarwe joins the... Can you imagine typing that 8,000 times in this book? Swarwe joins the wizard as his thief, spy, and assassin. Pretty much clears us out of categories for D&D. And helps him topple an empire and reclaim his seat of power. Swarwi creates a new destiny for herself, but doing so reshapes the destinies of multiple worlds. And when she rescues a powerful sorceress, she finds out that gods remember. And if you live long enough, all debts come due. Find out why everyone is obsessed with this rich, thoughtful, unapologetically queer fantasy debut. So this was the author's debut. I'm not 100% sure why it would need to be unapologetically queer. Who would you be apologizing to or for? But one way or another, I remember reading this last, 2 winters ago, and liking it very much. And I'm pretty sure. I wish I had the information in front of me now. I feel bad that I don't. I have a feeling that I added this to the list because the second book is coming out. I'll have to check, and I'll have to remember. I will check and remember to put a note on that in the description box so that you know why the hell I mentioned this. So there you go. Some new arrivals for you. It was starting with one that's not new. The Unspoken Name is not new, but it was very lively. It was very enjoyable. Then we have A Brush with Love, Dentists in Love. We have Gen Z Explained, which I'm really hoping is not Gen Z Blindly Defended. I'm hoping that it shares the warts and all. Then we have Wild Spectacle, kind of a mixture of natural history and autobiography. Foxconn, about one particular con of the Trump administration. In-depth reporting on one particular con that really did devastate some families. Then we have We the Presidents by Ronald Gruner. I know there are quite a few U.S. president fans out there. Right, I know there are quite a few people who watch my videos who love reading about U.S. presidents and have all the books like this, sweeping narrative histories of multiple presidencies like this. This is going to be the latest one. This will be the first one out of the gate in 2022. And finally, Reader, I Buried Them and Other Stories by the great Peter Lovesey and his intrusive cat. A collection of Peter Lovesey short stories, including some new ones. Just can't do better than that. So there you go. Some new releases and an old release, some forthcoming stuff, a little bit of Bard, a little bit of Blue, just so that you have a bookish video to sort of contemplate, what's out there, what's coming, what might interest you. That's what I'm here for. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.